Hello everybody, I am David Barrett and I'm pleased to welcome you to today's webinar, Thailand Business Events Industry Recovery. I appreciate the time that you're taking to join us, especially when there's so many webinars going on at the moment. We have 617 registered participants. I've pulled together a panel of 4 experts to discuss Thailand's business events recovery, and I'll be introducing them shortly. But first, I'd like to walk you through a guide as to how the webinar works. Okay, so today's webinar is going to run for 1 hour from 10 till 11. And the goals and objectives of the webinar are to support Thailand's tourism industry and my sector during this time of crisis, to share views and ideas for the way forward in a fluid and uncharted recovery process, and not to use the webinar as a platform to promote specific businesses or products. We are recording this webinar, so it will be able to be viewed on YouTube later today. And we do welcome questions and suggestions, and you can use the panel for comments on the right, and we'll be posting and posing your questions to the panelists. And after the panelists have given a short update and presentation, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. Our panelists today include Nichapa Yoswee, who developed and enforced the National Strategic Development Policy and Framework for the MICE industry in Thailand. And in her leadership capacity at TCEB, Nichapa has also developed the Sustainability Master Plan to drive Thailand to be Asia's MICE sustainable destination. Then we have Sumate, who is president of TICA, and a site president wrote, "Mention incentive travel in Thailand," and the name Sudasna soon follows. Sumate, as president of TICA, is also founder of CDM Thailand, a leading DMC. And TICA's primary function is to aid the quality and sustainable growth of Thailand as a preferred destination for business events. The association currently has 495 members. Our next panelist is Imtiaz Muqbil, and Imtiaz is one of the longest standing tourism journalists in Thailand, a historian on Thai tourism industry, and an analyst of tourism trends. Not someone to sugarcoat the facts. I asked Imtiaz to join the panel as he says it as it is. Be prepared for an inconvenient truth. Next up, to round up our panel, is David Littekun, who leads BI Worldwide's Asia Pacific region with offices in Australia, Melbourne and Sydney, China, Shanghai and Singapore. His responsibilities also include the oversight of Australian-based Veritas events, an internationally recognized production company in which BI Worldwide holds a controlling interest. Without further ado, I'd like to pass over to Nichapa, Senior Vice President at TCEB, who can update us on what are TCEB's initiatives and hopefully the way forward for the industry. Over to you, Nichapa.
Thank you, David. Thank you for having me, and good morning, everyone. On behalf of my colleagues at TCEB, we hope that everybody are keeping well. And I first like to take this opportunity to express gratitude to all the healthcare professionals worldwide for the dedication and risking their lives for our well-being. So thanks to all the medical heroes. Although the journey to recovery seems so twilight for many, I would first like to reassure everyone that TCEB and the business events industry in Thailand are doing everything in our power to ease the squeeze from the pressure our global event industry is now experiencing. TCEB has been actively communicating with key stakeholders since the beginning of COVID-19 and closely monitored government measures. Today, I would like to share with you some of the recent updates that hopefully may humbly assist you in future planning. The first update is TCEB's 3Rs strategy. In addition to the government's $9.4 billion economic aid package, TCEB has drafted the 3Rs strategy, which will serve as our direction in shoring up the MICE sector. The first R is a response plan, which already been launched since early February or even late January. We set up MICE COVID Info Center. We immediately eased up support criteria and provide additional relief campaign to support events that took place and will take place this year. Hygiene funds has been allotted to venues that pass Thai MICE venue standards. Special funds has also been allocated to activate domestic MICE, and that's before the lockdown. We had established an online platform for webinar and virtual events for public use. Additional online tools are under construction. We also connect, reconnect, engage, and re-engage our customers, and still do intensively, not only to focus on the safety and well-being of our industry peers, but also to gain the commercial insights to help us evaluate and project the upcoming impact so that we can prioritize and coordinate the initiatives that hopefully will future-proof the industry. The second and third R is the recovery and restoration framework and plan, and we focus on two dimensions. First is the government policy. We are pushing business event to be one of the recovery-focused sectors of the government, which will enable the flow of the recovery funds. Also, the taxation regime, visa facilitation, logistics arrangement, etc. On private sector side, TCEB and industry associations are working very closely to create new products and services. This time, technology would play an important role in both products and services. We prioritize our source markets so that we can step up the promotion once everything is ready. And while domestic remains key, we expect that Asia would come up first. So we will formulate a new reconnected subvention program tailored to each source markets and to serve the new normal. Right now, we are working on, among many other projects, drafting on the hygiene discipline guideline with key industry associations for business events industry in Thailand. Hopefully, this can boost the trust mindset of our international clients. The second update that I would like to share is the exhibitions we path the nation's recovery. TCEB supports 54 international exhibitions this year. To date, 3 cancelled. The remaining 51 trade shows will be on during the second half of the year, so we are looking at a pretty busy second half of the year. We can say that exhibition industry foundation is quite solid, even though this year the show size will be small. The third update would be Thailand attracts meetings and incentives. Our international reps stay very close to our clients. They engage and re-engage our client in deep conversation. And during the last year and earlier this year, TCEB has few roadshows regionally. And since March, we received over 41 new business leads worth approximately 4.5 billion Thai baht. The average group size ranges from 100 to 3,000. Majority comes from China, India, Singapore, and Japan. Over 65% of these inquiries are scheduled to travel in Q4 this year, and the remaining the next year and beyond. The fourth update is on convention. My convention department is finalizing key strategies to re-engineer new convention ecosystem to accommodate the new normal. Of course, technology would play an important part in the new normal. We are actually entering in full gear into the fourth IR or the fourth industrial revolution, where digital would play an important part. We are also exploring the opportunity to come up with our own regional convention in response to the unstable situation and global travel restriction and confidence. We are also working very closely with some industry associations in terms of bidding. to make sure that we do not fall out from the bidding loop once it is opened. Having said that, TCEB would continue to keep our communication channels open, mainly to participate in meaningful exchange on the topic that will redefine the business events. And I thank the local, regional, and global industry associations for working with me in the past few months. I welcome relevant information that would empower our private sector's partners to provide international visitors with a new sense of health and safety. In summary, we will continue to contribute to the greater good of our industry and for the country of Thailand and also worldwide. Thank you. That's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Nichapa. A lot to talk about when we come to the questions, and great to see that, again, TCEB is taking leadership in the situation. Fantastic. We're blessed to have such a great organization. Next up is Sumate, President of TICA. I'm going to put him in the spotlight now to give us an update on TICA's perspective. Over to you, Sumate.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm glad to be here. And just to go on with life here, for the private sector, it's obvious that we are the ones first hit, and it's been a challenge to maintain a balance between panic and hopefulness, and also preparedness for what's coming up. And now I think we're in the second month of lockdown with zero business. The moods have hopefully become more stabilized. I mean, now we've been meeting the challenge of keeping our heads, our noses afloat above water. And thankfully for the leaders of the major associations here, they have fought until we have now gained financial support for the staff, at least. The staff who are unemployed, who are vacant at the moment, to help with their daily lives. And for companies, we are managing our cash flow and keeping costs down, and at the same time encouraging staff to maintain good spirit. We're looking at our tools, systems, products, monitor market sentiments around the world. And if some of us can send messages, then we would do it in a way that it's not hard sell, of course. It's to tell people we are still here and we are maintaining good spirit, and looking forward to welcoming our guests back again. A lot of you probably saw the survey result from TTR Weekly, of course, credit to Don Ross, that a survey was made in China, and a great majority of people are now planning to, they think they will start to travel again in October onwards. So that's good news, and that's good positive echo from the main market that we are doing. And also on April 14th, that was Global Meetings Industry Day. 12,500 people joined the webinar, I think, that the Meetings Industry Council organized. And also a poll was created. And majority of people think that travel would start again by Q4, of course. And okay, most of them, most events would be hybrid, seeing that digital would become an integral part of our business. For TICA, we've been keeping members informed together. We've encouraged people to join our online courses. We have one coming up next week, which 130 people have signed up for, which is good. And there will be a few more coming up with personal improvement, professionalism, and so on, and with support from TCEB, which is very much appreciated. We will go through this together. I think that's not much that we can say as a private sector, because we are just waiting to see, and we are following developments which evolve nearly on a daily basis. I think Thailand can use our strength when the business is starting to rebound. Our country has been doing very well in controlling the infection and the spread of the pandemic. which is quite positive for us. I think we are grateful for the government to have been doing such a great job. Okay, for the moment.
Thank you, Sumate. And again, it's great having TICA as the industry association to show leadership and to provide unity during this time of crisis. Thank you. Next up is Imtiaz, who is a great analyst of the tourism industry, and he's going to share with us his views of where we're going, what the recovery is, and this man never mixes his words, so it may be an inconvenient truth. Over to you, Imtiaz.
Good morning, Sawadee Kap. David, thank you very much indeed for having me here. It's a pleasure to be with all the other respected panelists. I'd also like to thank Nichapa for mentioning the medical practitioners. This is actually the year of the nurse declared by the World Health Organization. So it's quite an appropriate time to be paying tribute to the hard work that they're doing. I will concentrate on what I mentioned in my blurb, which is the fact that when the neighborhood is burning down, it is quite obvious that every business is going to burn down with it. So the key thing is to try and figure out, as Nichapa mentioned, in terms of future-proofing the industry, it is very important to find ways to stop the neighborhood from being burned down in all the future crises which are bound to come. And I can assure you that the next crisis is just around the corner right after this one ends. Now, I'm not a businessman, so I really don't know how, with all the individual nuts and bolts of getting businesses up and running. So I couldn't probably go into that. But I will give you a few broader tips on how you can future-proof this industry about a year or so down the road. Now, I've been covering Thailand's tourism industry for the last 40 years, since 1981. I consider this country's tourism industry to be the greatest story in global tourism history. And I repeat that, the greatest story in global tourism history. There is probably no country in the world that has been hit by as many crises as this country. And still last year, we got 40 million visitors. This year, of course, it's expected to be sharply down because of the pandemic. But I can assure you that when the sky is clear, the industry is going to be back big time and in full swing. Now, what I'm going to basically leave you with 3 pointers going forward in terms of, again, focusing on the keyword future-proof. One is what I have seen from covering all these crises over the last 40 years. The travel industry basically has a problem with never learning from the mistakes of the past. Other industries do, other sectors do, the economic sector does, the health sector does, but the travel industry never learns from past mistakes. It's always focusing on what they call crisis management, which means that they manage the crisis, and then they focus on resilience, which means you manage the crisis and then you hit it with another great big marketing campaign, and the industry is resilient, it bounces back again, and the sunny sides are back. But I have never seen anywhere as deep and introspective analysis asking ourselves what lessons can be learned from the past history of crisis over the last 10 years, last 10, 20, 30, 40 years. The other issue that we need to focus on, if we need to address this issue of learning from the mistakes, we need to start changing some of the content of our MICE industry travel forums, of our MICE forums, our travel industry forums. In the last 10 years or so, I can assure you that the travel industry forums have become downright boring. It's the same old usual gang of suspects coming there and delivering the same old spiel, mostly sponsors who of course have to be there because they are invited. And it's the same old stuff that you keep hearing all the time. And to me, it just sort of dulled the brain. The industry has become much bigger. And as you can see, when in using the analogy of the neighborhood, if you're trying to put out the fire in the entire neighborhood, getting people to talk about the same old things about business recovery, everything else is not going to help you stop the neighborhood from being burned down. It might help you get the business back after you've reestablished everything. But if you're trying to focus on how to stop the neighborhood from being burned down in the first place, the content of many of these forums and others events that we are doing on will have to be expanded a little bit to bring in other people from outside the industry, NGOs, social activists, diplomats, businessmen, and others to broaden the horizons and our own horizons. It's actually good for us to learn from different perspectives about what we can do. And the third thing that I would like to point out, in terms specifically more on the MICE sector, just following up on the first 2 points, we in the industry, in the MICE sector, have over the years become pretty much order takers, which means that you have an association or a government agency or a major multinational corporation which decides that they're going to hold a major event. And then they call us, the hotels, the tour operators, the DMCs and others, to come and do all the, to lay all the infrastructures and to get the transportation and the tours and everything else sorted out. So essentially, we are really nothing more than order takers. What I would like to see changed going forward, again, in terms of future-proofing the industry, is for us to become actually content curators in our own right. We can actually do that. The world has changed significantly. And it's very important for us as an industry to basically identify our own issues. What challenge do we need to face? What challenge will we need to face going forward? And that's going to be a completely new, different ballgame. It's not just going to be about climate change. It's going to be about geopolitical issues. It's going to be about economic issues. It's going to be about social activism. It's going to be a completely new ballgame. The World Economic Forum calls it dystopia, which is the opposite of utopia. And it's not going to be, again, I don't want to go back over the same old words, but it's not going to be a new normal. It's actually going to be a new abnormal. And the next crisis is just basically around the corner. So 3 takeaways from my talk: learn from the mistakes of the past, change the content of all our events and forums, and move from being order takers to content curators. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Imtiaz. Again, you've got great insight into the market, some very good recommendations there, and hopefully a call to action for the industry going forward. Next up is David Littekun, Senior Vice President, BI Worldwide, overseeing the Asia Pacific region. And I'll bring David into the spotlight. It's all yours, David.
Great. Thank you, David. Thanks for having us. I'm looking at this screen and it seems like Sumate should be in my background and I should be in his, because I'm very casually dressed and I'm in an office and he's like dressed in a suit at the beach. So I'm enjoying this bit of dystopia that Imtiaz has been talking about. Thanks for having me on today. I think my perspective is a bit different. I have a role that looks out over the whole region. And I've seen the region respond to the crisis differently and at different times. So obviously it started in China, it moved its way, and many other parts of the world thought it really wasn't going to affect them. I think Australia, New Zealand, they really didn't think it was good. They thought they were a bit protected, as did Europe and North America. So it's been interesting for me to see the response from China through Asia into Australia, New Zealand. I think the one thing that has been constant is once the countries realized the virus was real, our business was dramatically affected. So a bit as you had said, Sumate, for BI Worldwide, we're fortunate that we are a diverse company. We are not only in the events business. We have a large marketing and loyalty business, which helps our portfolio. But our events business itself, we haven't done any events. We did a couple in Australia and in Singapore in kind of the early to mid February. But after that, we have nothing in our books scheduled. Everything has been postponed or canceled through next October, next November. And the message that I give my teams and that I echo from our global leadership out of North America is we can't be too positive. We can't be panicked. So we need to be somewhere in the middle. But what we have to plan for is that worst case scenario. So BI Worldwide, we're working with our clients. We say, let's plan for the worst case scenario. Let's work on what's in our control. And then hopefully it won't be as bad as we think. I think according to the other people, I also agree. I think first and foremost, the domestic markets will come back first. It will start with leisure travel, the casual vacationer. Then it will move into domestic business. And when governments, agencies, airlines open up travel of ease. I was in a call yesterday with PCMA and had a great speaker. He was talking about, when we open up the markets, well, for our business, opening up the markets with 14-day quarantines, that's not opening up the market. You're not going to be able to do a regional or a global MICE program if countries have 14 days quarantine in and out of a country. So I think for us, that is the big key of returning to, I don't think we'll return to a new normal. I think it will be a bit more disruptive in that. So I think for domestic MICE, I think certainly from our clients, we see a return perhaps in the fourth quarter in Australia, perhaps in China. The meetings will be smaller. I think from my perspective, I'm not counting on any revenues until starting next March of 2021. I think that companies will be quite reticent. I have an office, like I said, in Shanghai. I know of a few meetings that were scheduled this past week. Clients were having meetings, 40 people, 50 people accepted, and less than 4, 5, 10 people showed up for the actual meetings. So I think even when the meetings come back, there still is going to be a hesitation. You wake up in the morning, you find out Harbin is on lockdown. You react. I'm not going to this meeting in Shanghai. So I think there will be, even when meetings come back, they'll be smaller. And if people hear a bit of news about the virus coming back, people will retrench back into more of their lockdown mentality. So I am the eternal optimist. So I'm struggling a bit with this worst case scenario. But I think that for domestic MICE, look at the fourth quarter of next year. We do have clients very interested in Thailand. We're looking at probably that business coming back starting next March into maybe next June of 2021. Personally, I guess I'm proud to say to you all in Thailand, I love your country. We recommend your country. We're in now wave 2 in Singapore of the virus. We had it wave 1. And there was this window of time when people could travel. And I'm happy to say that I did travel to Thailand, to Koh Samui. Had a wonderful time. The people were fabulous. Was happy to bring some money because the business was hurting there. But literally got back to Singapore a day before the quarantine orders came in. I self-quarantined to do what was right. But that just shows you the fragility of business travel. We felt very safe in traveling. But then all of a sudden, things started getting out of control. The Europeans were coming into Asia, and the second wave hit many of our countries. So I think that is this dystopian environment that Imtiaz is talking about, that is MICE leaders, as travel leaders, we're going to be, I think, dealing with for the next 12 to 18 months.
Great, thank you. Thank you, David. So you're basically saying you're forecasting a return of business Q4 next year before it kicks in.
I think Q4 for domestic MICE business. So if Thailand wants to bring Thai people together for an incentive or perhaps for a conference, I would think fourth quarter. I know in Australia, that's what our business leaders are saying in Australia, in China as well. We have some clients that want to come to Singapore. But again, if you have a 14-day quarantine in and out of a country, that event, there's no way that can take place. So I think domestic fourth quarter is international. We have clients that we're blocking starting in March of 2021. We had some up till 2 weeks ago. We had some international programs, multinationals bringing their Asia groups together, scheduled for next November. And 2 weeks ago, all of that business moved to next March to June.
Wow.
I think multinational companies are going to be very reticent to bring together large groups. Most of them are headquartered in North America and Europe. They're right in the middle of this crisis. They're going to be very, very hesitant to bring people together in an international destination. I think domestic, that might be different. Bringing a multinational, bringing their Thai people together for Thai business will be different. But
great.
I think we have some time to go.
Great to have that insight, because there's so much talk and crystal ball gazing as to when the market's going to return. Khun Sumate referenced the global survey during the Global Meetings Industry Day on the 14th of April. It's quite interesting. I'm going to throw up a slide here. The survey, 3% of respondents were saying they're either attending or planning a live event May. That seems very early to me. As you see, most 27% of the respondents said September. I'm banking on a return for domestic MICE in Thailand to come back by then. And then obviously it drops off. I'm assuming that drop off is because planning of new events is currently on pause. And so as we move into the year, normally the Q4 would start to build out, but obviously it's not, it's on pause at the moment. But what's the view of the panelists as to your prediction for when the business is coming back? David just said it's going to be next year. Sumate, what do you think?
I'd like to be optimistic. I'd like to believe the survey results of the GMID day, but at the moment it doesn't really seem sensible to expect business to start coming back by September. Really, we have an international conference, a really upscale one for 300-400 people. First scheduled to happen in April. Now it's been moved to end of August into early September. Thankfully, I mean the organizers, the hosts are very supportive, very determined to make this happen, and we are keeping fingers crossed this could happen. But then, you know, by September, I don't think a lot of countries in the Western Hemisphere would lift their lockdown regulations. So it'll be very hard, and airlines will not be flying in their full schedule. So it's a hopeful thought, but I would think realistically maybe November, December.
Okay.
Yeah.
David, there's a question on the screen from
there
Paul.
is from Paul of the sponsorship experts. Let me read that.
Yeah.
Some international marketers are saying there is no post-COVID-19 playbook, and the most relevant is the playbook used after World War II. What are your thoughts, Imtiaz?
Okay. I think that's probably an extremely relevant question, David, because it points to this whole issue of learning from history and the mistakes of the past. If you go back to the first 50 years of the last century, this is exactly what was happening. We were in the middle of two debilitating world wars, extremely destructive world wars, which took tens of millions of lives. The First World War was fought between 1914 and 1918. And you can imagine when that war ended, everybody would have said there would have been this euphoria that the war has ended, then, you know, let's get back business, get back again. And it only took 21 years before the next war started, which was even worse than the first one. 21 years. And we are today, the first 50 years of the last century are today actually pretty much in parallel with what's going on in the first 50 years of this century. Except that instead of having two big world wars, you have now a whole series of little wars. You have a war on terror, you have a trade war, you have an environmental crisis, you have ethnic and other clashes. These are all what again, the World Economic Forum refers to as dystopia. I think we do ourselves a great disservice when we don't learn from the lessons of history and ask ourselves, what is it that we can actually do to prevent the next crisis from occurring? It's nice to focus on when the business is actually going to come back, but we have to future-proof that industry at a much broader level. And the relevance to the World War II playbook is actually just relevant. It's absolutely spot on, because it's not what happens after World War II. It's why didn't people learn from the lessons of World War I to prevent a recurrence of World War II? And that's the period we are in right now. 2020 is right at the start of that period. So take those parallels of what we were going through in the first 50 years of the last century and juxtapose them or superimpose them on top of the 50 years of this century. And then you'll see some parallels of lessons that we can learn and what we actually need to what I call prepare, prevent, and preempt the next crisis from taking place. And actually that's, I think, for all of us in the industry, if we make that one of the most priority items on our agenda going forward, that's the best thing you can do to future-proof the industry going forward.
David Robinson from River Partners has posted a comment, and it's actually directed to you, Imtiaz, but it'd also be good to find out what Nichapa thinks on this. Have we seen the end of Teflon Thailand? Because Thailand's been through so many crises with the politics, with tsunami, bird flu, SARS, and we've rebounded very quickly. Thailand's an evergreen destination. So David asks, tourism is often at odds with our environment, single-use plastic, food waste, air pollution, air traffic impact on climate change. Do you see the industry using COVID-19 as a catalyst for change? Is this where you think content is the answer? Because if we go back 3-4 months ago, we were talking about over-tourism. There was a huge drive on sustainability. Well, that hasn't ended. That will come back. Do we use this opportunity as a catalyst to craft the way forward? What do you think, Nichapa?
I think the term sustainability will become core in all planning and also in the heart of tourism. In the past, we have been sort of neglecting this particular issue, which is one of the most important. And also, sustainability must be considered. You can also put sustainability as one of the core content. Right now and even before COVID, sustainability has always been considered as one of the decision criteria from international clients. And with this, those who can really round in sustainability practices would, to me, come out better than those who don't. So to answer, yes, sustainability, we can use this COVID thing, even don't have the COVID thing, we should cultivate sustainability mindset from the starting from the experience provider down to educating the people or the travelers themselves.
Okay, thanks, Nichapa. Imtiaz, would you like to add anything to that?
Yes, David, thank you. It's a very valid question, actually, because it has actually, I would say, destroyed one of the most oft-used comfort zones of our industry. We always have gone around telling people in the industry that tourism actually contributes to the environment, to cultural preservation, heritage, etc., etc. But you're actually now seeing that the environment tends to revive and the animals and the wildlife tends to come back when the tourists stay away. And there's actual proof of that. So, I mean, that alone should tell us that when we go around preaching to the people that tourism is good for the environment, that's in the wake of what is just going on, that is a complete fallacy in the light of things. Tourism does not contribute to the environment. When tourists stay away, that actually contributes to the environment more than anything else. That alone is food for thought, and that alone is one lesson that we should be learning going forward.
I should be censoring this, Imtiaz, careful, but you do say it as it is. I want to bring David in on this because Imtiaz has been circulating surveys and information on a daily basis or near daily. There was one survey, again, out of the UK, and it said 9% of Britons want life to return to normal once lockdown is over, but they've noticed significant changes during the lockdown, including cleaner air, more wildlife, and stronger communities. So only 9% of Brits want to go back to the way that we were doing things before. Do you think that will translate into the business events sector, regionally and globally? How are your clients going to address sustainability and more mindful programs? Or do you think it's not an agenda for you, David?
Well, I think it definitely is an agenda. I think there's going to be a balance between sustainability and safety. So, for example, we're talking with hoteliers now on a couple of things. One is we're going to have to look at a different meeting plans, different ballroom plans. How can people be more physically distant from each other? I think buffets gone. So that's a great opportunity to come up with a more sustainable way to provide meals to people that are healthy, because buffets are not going to be viewed as a healthy option. It can also be a great way to eliminate food waste. A lot of food waste at buffets and at coffee breaks and tea breaks. So how can we use more sustainable products, better packaging, more plated kind of meals that can also help with our sustainability efforts? So I think those are the kind of things that I think sustainability can go hand in hand with the New World Order. But I think clients, first and foremost, will be more focused on health and safety in a sustainable manner. But I think for a while, it was almost more sustainable over the other because it wasn't as big of a concern. So I think definitely there will be a new way of operating, new SOPs coming in, expectations from hotels. I think actually in Asia is ahead of the game already on this. Again, I see this from when I go back to the US, which is where I'm from, or I go to Australia. I mean, most hotels already are very focused on sustainable efforts, hand sanitizer, because of all the epidemics that countries like Thailand have experienced. So I think actually Thailand probably is, maybe you don't realize it, but you're probably already several steps ahead of other competing markets in other parts of the world.
With regard to the operating procedures for sustainability once we get over this COVID-19, Sumate, I've got many TICA members that I meet and are asking me, are there any guidelines or SOPs that we can refer to? Is TICA working on this?
Yes, we are. Well, with the support from TCEB, Nichapa initiated this. We've developed hygiene and sustainable practices. Of course, that's COVID's perspective, but I'd also like us to look at the future, the next normal or the new normal. And I've always said sustainability is the core element of this, which Nichapa also echoed. So we are developing, we are monitoring and seeing what the world will come to. Actually, I heard from an interview of the TAT governor a few days ago. He mentioned something about over-tourism that we've been facing, and he mentioned about carrying capacity control and things like that, which really made me happy, because this is what I've been preaching for many years. We could start with 15 million visitors this year and work our way up, managing very well, making sure that people who come here appreciate what we have, keep our resources nice and in good shape, and that'll be sustainable. Maybe we'll work our way up back to 40 million a year again, but with only quality tourists. That's my wish.
Great.
Well, I have 2 points to add to that. May I?
Yes, please.
I think, first of all, this COVID thing is a proof on how we treat environment so unkindly in the past. So this is the time that we have to go back and reconsider and reflect on what we have been doing in the past. And like what Imtiaz said, that we should be able to learn from the past mistake. What TCEB and TICA has collaboratively working on in the past is that we come up with series of sustainability guidelines, event sustainability guideline. We come up with a guidebook. We come up with a carbon neutral calculation guidebook for all the operators to use as a guideline and calculate. And let's see what can be cut, what can be added, not at the expense of the nature and also the community, and how we can round in the community in principle so that we can really share the wealth and resource and also the social impact down to really into that community. We also provide funds for those venues and also operators to practice the carbon neutral event sustainability procedures. This is to encourage all the stakeholders to first understand, step themselves onto the platform of this sustainability practice thing, so that once they know, they would feel very comfortable that they will not be one of the causes to the nature disaster. It's not a man-made. Shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Can I add to that, David?
Yes, please.
One of the greatest stories I've ever covered is the history of Visit Thailand Year. Today in Thailand, not many people know anything about Visit Thailand Year, an event that was basically put the global travel and tourism industry on the map. Today, nobody knows what event was marked by that year. Nobody even knows what year that was. Just to enlighten viewers, that event marked the 60th birthday, the auspicious 5th cycle anniversary of His Majesty King Rama IX the Great, the previous king, the late king. He was known for his sufficiency economy, and he actually embodied. He was a living embodiment of that. He preached that in every message, in every public function that he could possibly, where he made it his presence felt. The key thing was in looking back at Visit Thailand Year. The industry, again, going back to the issue of learning from mistakes, exploited the marketing advantage of that with some of the biggest budgets that were ever given to the travel and tourism industry at that time in 1987. It was a marketing extravaganza par excellence. The industry took full advantage of that, but completely ignored His Majesty's management messages. And it is only now that people are beginning to awaken to that 30 years later. So one has to ask oneself that why is it that we actually never be able to balance the marketing advantages of this great country, which again, I repeat, is the greatest story in global travel and tourism history, with the management fundamentals that His Majesty was also preaching at that time. And bridging that gap, that historic gap, has been one of the biggest problems for Thailand going in running its tourism industry, and narrowing it and plugging it entirely is going to be the solution in terms of how it rebuilds and restructures its industry going forward. And of course, the MICE industry will have to play a critical role in that as well.
Great, thanks Imtiaz. I've got an interesting question from Rajat Bhatia from Anantara Bangkok Riverside and Avani Bangkok Riverside. And this is for you, David. I think you're in a good position to answer this, and also Kun Sumate for TICA, and also in your role as a leading DMC. So Rajat has asked, as part of restoring MICE business, do we see revisiting ourselves on the current agreements that we have between suppliers and the organizers, i.e., looking at force majeure deposits and cancellation policies? David, do you see a more tightening or relaxation of contracts when you place business with hotels and destinations?
Very interesting question. I would, first of all, a great question. I stayed at your property about 2 years ago, and we brought some groups there, so thanks for the question. I think that when the virus first hit, one of the things was really impressed with was the flexibility of the hoteliers. I can say across the board, every hotel we were working with and continue to work with have been incredibly flexible. And I think mainly if the hoteliers weren't flexible, I think most of our clients would have just canceled their programs. The flexibility allowed our clients to extend instead of canceling, but to postpone to a future date. So I think that, so that's how it started. But I think now everyone's clients, suppliers, hoteliers, our clients are now looking at how do we tighten up our agreements? How do we add more clauses, which I think could become a bigger problem of how do you come together on business. So I think that will change. Right now, there's a spirit of flexibility and cooperation, but that may change as people put in more contracts. I mean, now you can no longer get event insurance with COVID protection. So that's the outlier. So I think it will be interesting to see. I mean, so far, we had contracts that moved from March, April, May into next fall. Now those hoteliers have been very flexible with committing into the next spring. So I think it's going to be a tricky time. Also for us, force majeure it's also very tricky for us when we deal with programs that are international. So we may have a client who's paying for a program that's located in Singapore, traveling to Thailand. If Thailand's not on lockdown, force majeure isn't in play there. And that got very tricky for us in managing with our clients of what is force majeure and how do you manage it now if different countries have lockdowns, and you have a program that is more regional in nature. Certainly it's different if I'm in Australia or Thailand dealing with a Thailand only program, it's a bit more clear cut. Mm-hmm. So I think, force majeure is, I've been to some more seminars on this, and there is quite a bit of gray area within force majeure. I would like to think that, I do think that companies, hoteliers, companies like ours will want more deposits up front. I think that the industry, it's gotten pretty difficult actually, where a lot of the burden of the cost is put on the DMC, the intermediary, the hotel. I think that probably will change because most companies don't have the cash flow to front those funds. So I think that will change as well. I think contract language, also payment terms will become much more scrutinized. I was on a call yesterday where someone said, people just kind of glance at the contracts. I never do because my name's on it. So I read the contracts. But I think a lot of people just kind of skim the contracts. So I think there'll be a much more of a tightening of how we review them, what clauses are put in, payment terms, deposits, what have you. Absolutely.
Okay, thanks, David. We're actually running out of time here. I've got one final question, which I'm going to pose to Kun Sumate and Kun Nichapa. Maybe Imtiaz might want to kick in. Once we get over this virus, it presents a tremendous opportunity for Thailand to launch a campaign, a destination campaign. TCEB's had brilliant campaigns like Redefine. Now you've got Mice United. But the private sector are also working on fragmented campaigns. You've got Anthony Lark leading the Phuket Hotel Association, of which I'm on a working group, and we're working with David Keane at Quo to launch a destination relaunch for Phuket. Then Peter Caprez at Marriott sent me this, which is a concept for a campaign that could incorporate Joint Chambers of Commerce, TAT, TCEB, TICA, THA, and others to launch a brand new campaign to encourage tourists and business event delegates back to Thailand. Do you think this is a time when the MICE industry and the tourism as a whole should come together and we come up with a new campaign for the destination? Because Amazing Thailand's run its time and has done great for Thailand, but I'm sure a lot of destinations are going to come into the market with new campaigns. Should we be planning now, and should we be calling all of these associations to come together and unite under one campaign? What do you think, Kun Sumate, before I go on to Kun Nichapa?
Makes absolutely best sense to have one voice, and for all of us to meet and agree on the attractive and sensible proposals that would work. Now it's a different scenario from the Visit Thailand year and whatever past crisis we have had and promotions. Now there are a lot more players in the field and a lot more international brand names who would want their own, activities, global kind of. But then for Thailand, I think, as David rightly said, we are in a strong position to receive rebounding business, and we should do it properly, well together. I think it will be the mandate of the government or TCEB for MICE and TAT for mainstream tourism to come up with the togetherness Team Thailand offers.
Great, thank you, Kun Sumate. Very quickly from Kun Nichapa.
Right. I think it is very important for us to have a unified voice and also one single message that can really portray the hope and also the readiness of Thailand on how we can really open for everybody to come to Thailand. So yes, we are in TCEB, within TCEB, we have been working on that in stages. And once we have things ready, we will definitely route in respective. TAT is absolute one of the partners that we have to work with to come up with that campaign. So the answer is yes.
Great. David, you're faced with a lot of destinations promoting themselves, trying to win your business. Do you think Thailand needs to reinvent itself with a new campaign to win back business after COVID-19? How have you seen Thailand presented pre-virus? Are we lost in a sea of promotions, or are we still up there?
I think, Thailand is always at the top of the list for so many of our clients.
Right.
You have, the country, you can see why it's been such a success story. You've got hospitable people, great food, great culture, diverse places you can visit within the country. I think continuing to expand on maybe some of those secondary destinations to move out the tourism to different areas and prevent overcrowding, I would say that's probably as important as if not more than a new campaign itself. I think promoting some of those underserved or more undiscovered destinations will be a stronger suit, which just means for MICE, you have to have proper infrastructure, hotels, meeting facilities in those locations. But as a country, that's a great value. It's a great value for the dollar as well. Your money goes far in Thailand for incredible quality. So, a new campaign is always good. I would just encourage additional undiscovered sites that can spread the tourists out.
Okay,
and would be my recommendation.
Great. And final words normally controversial from Imtiaz. What are your thoughts, Imtiaz?
David, my impression is that I've seen so many of these campaigns in the past, and I can tell you they all work. Thailand is a marketing genius. As David just mentioned, the fundamentals are strong. The demand is very high for this country. But again, we need to make sure that we get some of the other fundamentals right as well. If we go back to business as usual, we are going to see the same old issues of over-tourism, lax enforcement of environmental standards, poor safety and security regulations, labor issues, all the other nightlife and entertainment challenges that we have faced over the years. We need to fix these in parallel. You cannot attract quality tourists in a highly competitive environment. And is going to be probably more intense competition than ever going forward. Quality tourists only buy quality products. And if we go back to business as usual in what is known as the new normal, I'm sorry, all we are going to do is make the same old mistakes that we have done over the past, and it'll be back to the same old thing when the next crisis hits. Okay. Because believe me, the next crisis is going to be just around the corner.
Okay, thanks, Imtiaz, for those closing words. Well, it's been very productive 1 hour. It's gone very, very quickly. I would like to thank everyone for joining us today, and also the organizations who've given support for this webinar. I apologize for anybody that's had a challenge logging in. As I mentioned, the video will be available on YouTube later today. Thank you, TCEB, for your leadership. TICA for, again, leading the private sector. BI Worldwide, David, you're a leader regionally, and it's great to have you on board. And also Imtiaz, who's very controversial, but says it as it is, from Travel Impact Newswire.
Thank you, David.
Our next webinar next week is Communications in Recovery. And we've got a great lineup with David Johnson from Delivering Asia, Joanne Dennison coming in from Massachusetts, USA, meetings industry educator, Claire Mann, psychologist, managing director from Communicate 31 agency, and Kun Prachum, who's vice president of TICA. We've got a lot of questions which we weren't able to answer, but I'm going to see if TICA will allow us to post those questions on TICA Social, and then we can all respond on TICA's social channels. If not, it'll have to be on my channel. Thank you so much. I'm going to end this meeting, and thanks again to our expert panel. It's been a very quick but informative 1 hour. Thank you.